Do you know the single most dangerous number in the world right now that almost no one is talking about? 3 months ago, every single defense planner on Earth agreed on what that number was. Yesterday, it doubled. Before I tell you what that number is, hit the like button right now. Not because I want the likes, not even because the algorithm needs them, but because this video will be suppressed within the first hour if it does not move fast. The kind of story I am about to tell you is exactly the kind of story that does not reach normal people. It stays buried in Senate transcripts, in closed defense briefings, and technical reports nobody reads. The only way it reaches anyone outside that world is if you tap, like right now, so the algorithm shares it with someone else. And if you have not subscribed yet, do that now and hit the bell. There will be a major update to this story within the next 48 hours. I can tell you that much with confidence. You will not get a notification about it unless you click that bell. For 17 years, Iran told the world one single thing about its missile program. They said it over and over and over again. They said it in press conferences, in United Nations speeches, and interviews with Western journalists. They said it so many times that it stopped being a claim and became a fact. What did they say? They said Iran would never build a missile that flew further than 2,000 kilometers. Not because they lacked the ability to go further. They insisted the capability was there. They just had no reason to use it. They claimed the program was defensive. They claimed it was regional. They claimed it existed purely to protect Iran from the kind of attack it suffered during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, when Saddam Hussein rained missiles down on Tehran, and there was almost nothing anyone could do about it. That narrative held up for a surprisingly long time, not because anyone trusted Iran, but because the physics made sense. A missile that flies further needs a bigger body. It needs more fuel. It needs an airframe that can survive the brutal stresses of a longer, faster, higher flight. Every extra 1,000 kilometers of range adds enormous engineering difficulty and enormous cost. So when Iran said 2,000 kilometers was its absolute ceiling, a lot of serious people genuinely believed it. Not because they trusted the regime, because the numbers added up. Almost no one noticed when that fact died on the 20th of March. At 2:17 a.m. local time, 2 objects left a remote launch pad in central Iran. There was no announcement, no press release, no tweet celebrating it. For 11 days, almost nobody on Earth even knew the launch had happened. One of those objects flew for 11 minutes. It reached the very edge of space. It traveled more than 4,100 kilometers. And then it broke apart roughly 120 kilometers north of Diego Garcia, a joint American and British military base sitting alone in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Almost every news outlet on the planet reported this as a failure. 2 missiles fired, 0 hits. 1 broke up in flight. The other was reportedly intercepted before it got close. Nothing to see here. Move along. That is the single most misleading headline of the entire year. When a new missile is tested, the goal on the first attempt is not precision. The goal is proving that distance is possible at all. And the missile did exactly that. It flew 4,100 kilometers. That is almost exactly double the number Iran had sworn was its absolute hard limit for 17 straight years. That fact alone rewrites every strategic map that has existed in this region for nearly 2 decades. And almost the entire world missed it. It sat quietly in the background for weeks. A few defense analysts talked about it in private. A few intelligence reports mentioned it. Nobody said anything public. Then, on the 29th of April, everything changed. The Secretary of Defense of the United States sat down in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee. He raised his right hand, he swore an oath, and he told lawmakers, on the record, under oath, that he personally witnessed a 4,000-kilometer missile being fired at Diego Garcia. Think about what that means. This was not a leaked report. This was not an anonymous source talking to a journalist. This was the most senior civilian defense official in the United States government, under oath, confirming that Iran's public 2,000-kilometer limit had essentially been a myth told for 17 years, and almost every major news outlet buried that line near the bottom of their coverage. Most people still have no idea this confirmation ever happened. So let us be absolutely precise about where we stand right now. 4,000 kilometers is not a rumor. It is not speculation. It is not a theory from a think tank. It is a confirmed, demonstrated, tested capability, confirmed by the Secretary of Defense under oath in front of Congress. That is the highest standard of public confirmation possible. That number is real. Now, a lot of you have seen people talking online over the last week about 5,000 kilometers. Let me be completely honest with you about that number because almost no one will tell you this part. 5,000 kilometers is a projection. It is not confirmed. There is no verified evidence that Iran has tested a missile that flew that far. No government has officially confirmed that capability. It comes from an analysis of a platform called the QAM 105, which is a satellite launch vehicle built by Iran's Revolutionary Guard. It was originally designed to put small payloads into orbit, not to strike ground targets. That distinction matters. But here is why the projection is taken seriously. The physics of launching a satellite and the physics of firing a long-range ballistic missile overlap enormously. Both require the same fundamental thing: getting a payload moving fast enough and high enough that it can travel an enormous distance before gravity pulls it back. If that satellite launch vehicle were stripped down, modified, and repurposed for military use, it could theoretically reach distances up to 5,000 kilometers. That is where the number comes from. So we have one confirmed number and one credible projection. 4,000 kilometers is confirmed. 5,000 kilometers is theoretically possible based on technology Iran already possesses. Those are two very different confidence levels. Blurring them together does nobody any favors. If you tell people Iran already has a 5,000 kilometer missile, you make the threat sound more exaggerated than it actually is, which gives the skeptics an excuse to dismiss the whole thing. If you tell people only the 4,000 kilometer number matters, you ignore the trajectory. And the trajectory matters more than the current capability, because weapons programs do not move backwards. They only move forwards. The question is not whether Iran reaches 5,000 kilometers. The question is when. Pause for 1 second. If you have made it this far into the video, you are not the kind of person who just watches the headline and scrolls on. You are the kind of person who wants to actually understand the situation, which makes you increasingly rare. So do me one small favor. Share this video with exactly one person right now, not your whole feed, just one person you know who you think should understand this story. This information will not arrive on their phone by itself. It will only reach them if you send it to them. The media is not going to cover this in depth. The news cycle has already moved on. The only way this context spreads is through you. So share this video with one person, one text message, one link. That is all it takes. Thank you. Let me explain something about the technology that almost no one has properly explained. Iran's main medium-range missile is called the Kheibar Shekan. It is the backbone of their mid-range arsenal. Officially, it has a range of 2,000 kilometers and carries a warhead that can weigh up to 800 kilograms. That is a genuinely enormous payload for a missile in this class. And all of that is true. It does have a range of 2,000 kilometers with a full warhead, but here is the trick. If you take half the weight out of that warhead, that exact same missile with the same engine, the same fuel, the same airframe, will fly 4,000 kilometers. Nothing exotic has to change. You do not need a new engine. You do not need new fuel. You do not need a new guidance system. You simply take some explosives out of the nose, and the missile gets lighter, which means it can travel much further using the same amount of propulsive energy. This is not a secret breakthrough. This is not a new invention. This is basic rocket physics. This is the trick Iran pulled on the entire world for 17 years. They told everyone the maximum range of the missile when it carries a full warhead, and they let everyone assume that was the maximum range of the missile itself. They let the entire world underestimate the threat by a factor of 2. That is how the 2,000 kilometer limit survived for so long. Now there's another part of this story that is arguably even more dangerous than the range. Iran now has maneuvering warheads. This is the element that breaks every single missile defense system on the planet. The Fatah hypersonic system. The Fatah 1 is described as a maneuverable re-entry vehicle, which means it does not follow a predictable arc, the way a traditional ballistic missile does. It can actually shift its flight path in the final phase of descent. It can turn left, it can turn right, it can change direction in the last 60 seconds of flight. Reported speeds are somewhere between Mach 13 and Mach 15. The Fatah 2 goes even further. It is described as a true hypersonic glide vehicle, capable of maneuvering within the atmosphere at speeds beyond Mach 15. Both systems have reportedly already been used in real combat operations. This is not paper technology. This is not promotional footage. This is hardware that has already been fired at real targets. To understand why this is so dangerous, you have to understand how every missile defense system in the world works. Every single interceptor system ever built, from Patriot to Iron Dome to the more advanced Arrow system, is built on one single fundamental assumption. That assumption is predictability. You can calculate exactly where a ballistic missile will land 3 minutes after it launches. A ballistic missile flies on a fixed, predictable arc. The defense system draws a line. It plots an intercept point along that line. It fires its interceptor to that point. That is how it works. It is a geometry problem. A maneuvering warhead destroys that entire concept. You can no longer calculate where it is going to land. Its final course can change at any moment. There is no reliable way to intercept something that can change direction in the final seconds of flight. No one on Earth has a working solution to this problem right now. Not the United States, not Israel, not NATO, not any defense contractor anywhere. Range gets all the headlines because range is easy to understand. But maneuverability is the thing that actually threatens to make billions of dollars of missile defense systems obsolete overnight. Let me put this in human terms. Imagine you are a goalkeeper. A normal penalty kick is predictable. You watch the ball, you calculate the trajectory, you dive. That is a traditional ballistic missile. Now imagine the ball can change direction in midair. That is a maneuvering warhead. You cannot train for it. You cannot plan for it. You can only hope it misses. That is where the world is right now. So what does this actually mean for the rest of the world? At 2,000 kilometers, Iran's missile program was a Middle East problem. It could reach Israel. It could reach American bases in the Gulf. It was contained. At 4,000 kilometers, this is no longer a regional issue. Berlin sits inside that range. So does Rome. So does Paris. London is roughly 4,400 kilometers from Tehran, right at the edge. Every single one of those cities is now inside the demonstrated range of an Iranian missile. Push the projection to 5,000 kilometers, and you start pulling in places even further north. Parts of Finland, parts of Austria, parts of Germany deeper into Central Europe. So this is not rhetoric. This is a map. This is geography. The distance between Tehran and Paris is not theoretical. It is measurable. And Iran has now demonstrated that its missiles can physically fly that distance. Now, I want to pause and give you the honest caveat that almost every other channel leaves out. Being able to reach a city is not the same as being able to hit it. Right now, Iran's accuracy at extreme distance is poor. The missile they fired at Diego Garcia missed by more than 100 kilometers. That is not a precision weapon. Any missile fired at Europe would have to fly over Turkey, which is a NATO member. It would have to fly over Greece, which is a NATO member. It would have to cross airspace that is monitored by some of the most sophisticated early warning radar systems in the world. It would be tracked from the second it left the launch pad. It would face multiple layers of air defenses before it even came close to any target. It would almost certainly be intercepted. All of that is true. And none of that matters when we are talking about strategy. Why does it not matter? Because deterrence does not require perfection. Deterrence only requires doubt. You do not need a 100% chance of hitting Paris. You only need a possibility. You only need a European defense minister to think for just one moment that there is a risk. That doubt changes decisions. It changes whether a country votes in favor of another weapons shipment to Israel. It changes whether a country allows its airspace to be used for strikes against Iran. It changes the entire political calculus of the region. A weapon that might work 5% of the time can still alter the outcome of a crisis. That is the entire point. This missile was never built to be fired. It was built to exist. And by literally just existing, it changes everything. All right, we're about to get to the part of this story that no other channel is talking about. If you're still here and you want to know what actually happens next, tap the subscribe button right now and hit the bell. I will tell you exactly why in a moment. Almost every channel that covered this story uploaded their video 3 days ago and moved on. This story is not over. This story is accelerating. There are already reports that a new test launch is being prepared. I will cover it the second there is any confirmed information, but you will not see it in your feed. You will not get a notification. The algorithm does not care about this story. The only way you will see the update is if you are subscribed and you hit that bell. That is not hype. That is just how this platform works. Right now, I will do an honest reassessment of the numbers. The range explained. 4,000 kilometers and 5,000 kilometers require distance. 4,000 requires distance. 4,000 kilometers and 5,000 kilometers sound similar on a screen. In reality, that extra 1,000 kilometers is an enormous engineering gap. Extending from 4,000 to 5,000 is not just a small step. It requires more fuel, more efficient staging, lighter materials, better guidance over a longer flight time. There is no guarantee Iran can close that gap quickly. There is no guarantee it happens at all, but there is a pattern here that we must acknowledge. 18 months ago, 4,000 kilometers was also considered a projection. Every single expert on Earth said that capability was at least 5 years away. Then Iran tested it. So when analysts tell you 5,000 kilometers is possible, the smart response is not to dismiss it as impossible. The smart response is to ask how long it will take. And the honest answer is that nobody really knows. That uncertainty is exactly what makes the situation dangerous. We have seen this exact story play out once before. 15 years ago, everyone laughed at North Korea's satellite launches. Every expert said the same thing. These rockets are unreliable. They fail constantly. They will never amount to anything. North Korea is at least 20 years away from an intercontinental ballistic missile. Then, within about 7 years, North Korea tested one. The world was stunned. The world should not have been stunned. The pattern was there in front of everyone. Satellite launch vehicles, range extensions, military application of space launch technology. The exact same elements are present in Iran today. I'm not saying Iran will follow the exact same timeline. I'm saying the underlying engineering path is essentially identical. And when that path is followed, at the end of it, There's an intercontinental missile capability that fundamentally changes strategic planning. So the only question is speed. And right now, Iran is accelerating. None of this is happening in isolation. Right now, as you watch this video, there have been 14 straight nights of airstrikes inside Iran. The United States has hit more than 90 separate military targets, command centers, missile storage sites, drone production facilities, coastal radar networks. These are not random choices. These are the targets you hit when intelligence believes a missile program is the most urgent threat. And Iran has retaliated against American bases across Bahrain and Kuwait. This is not a hypothetical conflict. This is happening right now, every day. And at the center of it all is exactly the missile program I am describing to you. Now, here is the trade-off that almost nobody is talking about. Over the last 3 months, the United States has pulled a significant number of Patriot missile defense batteries out of Europe. They have been redeployed to the Middle East to protect bases and to protect Israel. That is a completely reasonable short-term decision. You defend whatever is actively being shot at first. Nobody can argue with that logic. But here's the problem. Every single battery that leaves Europe is one less battery sitting in Europe. One less layer of defense covering the European continent at exactly the moment when Iran's range capability has expanded to reach European cities. Iran does not have to fire a single missile at Europe to benefit from this. They just have to exist. They just have to force NATO to spread its defenses thinner across a wider map. And the moment defenses get thinner anywhere, opportunities open up everywhere. That is the quiet, unglamorous, and deeply important part of this story that no headline is capturing. There is one final piece of this puzzle that almost no one mentions. Iranian missile technology is already being used in Ukraine. Every single day, Russian forces are firing Iranian-made ballistic missiles at Ukrainian cities. That is not a footnote. That is the largest live-fire test of Iranian missile technology in history. Every single time one of those missiles is fired, Iranian engineers receive data. They learn what works. They learn what fails. They learn what gets intercepted and what gets through. They learn how to improve the next version. That data is flowing straight back to Tehran every single week. The war in Ukraine is providing Iran with a real-world laboratory for its missile technology. And every month the war continues, Iranian missiles are getting better, more reliable, more survivable. By the time the war ends, Iran will have accumulated years of combat data that no other country has ever had access to. There is another layer here that I want you to think about. Iranian missile technology does not stay inside Iran. There is documented evidence that Tehran has transferred missiles to allies across the region. These missiles have been used in attacks on shipping, on infrastructure, on civilian targets. The technological lineage is spreading far beyond Iran's own borders. This means the threat of ballistic missiles is not going to be contained to one region. It is going to continue to diffuse across the Middle East, across the Red Sea, across the Mediterranean. The longer this crisis continues, the more countries and groups will hold this capability, and the harder it will become for any single country to defend against it. Zoom out for a moment and look at the bigger picture. Iran is a country that has been under sanctions for decades. It has faced assassination campaigns against its nuclear scientists. It has faced sabotage operations against its enrichment facilities. It has faced military strikes against its bases and its infrastructure. And yet, through all of that, its missile program has continued to advance. It has not stopped. It has not slowed down. You have to ask yourself why. A regime that is facing this much pressure does not keep pouring resources into a weapon system unless that system is the absolute centerpiece of its national strategy. Missiles are not a side project for Iran. They are the whole strategy. They are the way Iran projects power without a strong air force. They are the way Iran creates leverage without a functioning economy. They are the way a weakened country makes itself dangerous to everyone around it. That missile program is the heart of the regime's survival strategy. And that means it will keep improving no matter what we do. Now, let me give you the counter-argument, because there is one, and it deserves to be stated honestly. Some people will tell you this is all overblown. They will tell you Iran's missiles fail constantly. They will point out that the Diego Garcia launch was a technical failure. They will say that any missile fired at Europe would be shot down before it arrived. They will argue that Iran has very few of these long-range weapons, that they are extremely expensive, and that they cannot be produced in large numbers. And all of that is true. It does mean the current operational threat is far less serious than the theoretical threat. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but those critics miss the point. Missile programs improve. Every country that has ever built long-range missiles started with failures. The United States did, the Soviet Union did, North Korea did. Iran is now doing the same thing. You should never judge a missile program by its first test. You should judge it by its trajectory. And the trajectory here is absolutely clear. Iran has moved from 2,000 kilometers to 4,000 kilometers. They have developed maneuvering warheads. They have tested hypersonic systems in combat. They are continuously improving. That is the trajectory. If you dismiss it because the first test was slightly inaccurate, you're making the exact same mistake that the world made with North Korea. You are assuming the status quo will last forever. It will not. Here's the part I want you to take away from this video above everything else. The threats that end up changing the world rarely arrive with a warning. And they do not come with a big announcement. They arrive through a quiet accumulation of small events that almost nobody pays attention to. A test launch in the middle of the night, a 2-sentence answer in a Senate hearing, an obscure satellite launch vehicle nobody has heard of. These things happen, and then one day, years later, everyone wakes up and asks how we got here. This is how we got here. This is exactly how we got here. Right now, we're standing in a genuinely important moment in history. The old assumptions about Iran's missile range are gone. They have been gone for months, even though most people have not caught up yet. The strategic maps are being redrawn. Defense planners are scrambling. European governments are waking up to a threat they assumed would never arrive. And someone in Tehran is probably wondering how long it will be before 5,000 kilometers becomes a confirmed number instead of a theoretical one. The most remarkable part of this entire story is the silence. Think about it. There was no emergency summit of European leaders, no urgent NATO meeting, no speech from a president, no front-page headline. The entire balance of power in the region shifted quietly in a matter of months, and almost nobody reacted. That silence is not a sign that everything is fine. It is a sign that nobody is ready for what comes next. When the next test happens, and it will happen, the reaction will be very different. Russia will be watching. China will be watching. Every country in Europe will be watching. And the conversation that is happening right now, only inside closed rooms, will suddenly become the loudest conversation in the world. The only question is whether we will be ready. You now have the full context. You know what is real. You know what is projection. You know what actually happened on March 20th and what it means. In that sense, you are ahead of almost the entire rest of the planet. Most people have no idea this happened. Their understanding of Iran's capabilities is still based on the old 2,000-kilometer limit that stopped being true months ago. You are one of the few who actually knows better. What you do with that information is up to you. But I can tell you this much. The next time you see a headline about Iran's missile program, the next time you hear a politician say the threat is contained, the next time someone tells you this region is stable, remember this video. Remember that the world's most important changes are almost always quiet when they happen. Leave a comment below and tell me what you actually think happens next. Do you think Iran will reach 5,000 kilometers? Or do you think the international response will stop them first? I genuinely want to know where you land on this, because the answer says a lot about how you see the security situation that we are all now living in. I read every single comment, and if you want to be there for the next update, make sure you are subscribed and you hit that bell. This story is moving fast. There will be a new development before this video is even a week old, and when that happens, I will be covering it. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Most people stop before the halfway point. Most people never get the full context. You did. That matters. And I will see you in the next one.